Hello, everyone. Welcome to Strange History, where we delve into the strange and wonderful history of some of the world's most mundane things. This week is no exception as we talk about the riveting world of canned food and the can opener. Before we get into the history, let's go over some fun facts, if there are such things, about canned food. Almost 200 billion cans of food are produced in the world each year. The Hormel Company of Austin, Minnesota, sold the first canned ham in 1926. Carbonated soft drink canning began in 1940. Aluminum was introduced into metal can making in 1957. Aluminum beverage cans were introduced in 1964, and by 1985, they dominated the beverage market. A 40-year-old can of corn was found in the basement of a home in California. The canning process had kept the cans safe from contaminants and from much nutrient loss. In addition, the kernels looked and smelled like recently canned corn. But let's get into the history of cans and their openers. We talk about the can first because the can was invented 60 years before anyone thought to make an opener for them, which I think is pretty hilarious. Peter Durand was a British merchant who first patented the idea of preserving food in cans in 1810. He, however, showed little interest in how consumers could get the contents out of those cans. Earlier opening instructions simply read, "Cut around the top near the outer edge with a chisel and a hammer." I have visions of the Flintstones right now, Wilma in the kitchen with a hammer and a chisel trying to make dinner. So first came the can. Durand's idea was to fill a tin can with food, partly cap it, and then immerse it in boiling water. His patent did not specify how long. Once sealed, the contents would remain edible indefinitely. Durand tested his canned food on a long sail with the Royal Navy, after which it was inspected by experts from the Royal Society. They decided the food was just as edible as when the voyage had begun as when it ended. Durand quickly lost interest with his invention and never did anything with it, and he sold his patent to John Hall and Brian Donkin for £1,000. They saw the value in it and set up a commercial canning facility, and by 1813, the first tinned food was sold to the British Army and Navy. By 1818, the Royal Navy was consuming 24,000 large cans of food, some 40,000 pounds of food per year. Canned vegetables help prevent scurvy, a condition due to vitamin C deficiency that sailors would often get because fresh fruit and vegetables had been impossible to keep on those long voyages.
Yarr!
The Civil War, with its massive demands for feeding soldiers, caused a boom in the canned food industry. Annual production had increased from 5 million to 30 million cans by the end of the war. Still, there remained the problem of how to open the cans. Soldiers at least had bayonets, or when those failed, they'd actually shoot them with their guns. But hungry home cooks were often frustrated in their attempts to conquer the sturdy metal cans, which might weigh more than the food they contained. The first mechanical can opener, invented prior to the war in 1858, was invented by Ezra Warner of Waterbury, Connecticut. It looked something like a weapon itself. Shaped like a bent bayonet, Warner's invention had to be driven into the can's rim. A hilt-like guard kept it from penetrating too deeply into the can. Then a second sickle-like blade sawed around the top of the can. If the blades didn't scare the consumers, the jagged edges of the open can surely would. The U.S. Army adopted Warner's invention during the Civil War, but its domestic use was limited. Not until 1870, a full 60 years after the invention of canned food, did another Connecticut inventor, William Lyman, develop what we today might recognize as the can opener. Born in 1821 in Middlefield, Connecticut, Lyman was apprenticed as a pewtersmith in nearby Meriden. In his spare time, he also tinkered with inventions, including a refrigerating pitcher and tea and coffee pots. Lyman's most notable invention was the rotating wheel can opener. Like today's can opener, it used a sharp rotating cutting wheel that circled around the can's ring, slicing off the lid. But operating it wasn't simple. You had to adjust the length to fit the can by twisting a wing nut. The initial piercing of the can could prove hazardous and challenging as well. Still, Lyman's design would not be improved upon for another full half-century. In 1925, the Star Can Opener Company in San Francisco added a second serrated feed wheel that gave a firmer grasp of the can's edge as the cutting wheel circled the rim. This is the same basic design used in handheld can openers still today. Let's take the can opener out of Connecticut, and in 1931, the Bunker Clancy Company of Kansas City produced the first can opener that could be used one-handed. The Bunker gripped the can while opening it using the now familiar pliers-type handles to squeeze tightly, while a key was turned to rotate the cutting wheel. The rival manufacturing company, which still makes can openers today, acquired Bunker Clancy in 1938. Electric can openers also debuted in 1931, marketed as capable of safely opening 20 cans in a minute, but they were slow to catch on until 1956, when two California firms reintroduced the concept. Klassen Enterprises had only limited success with a wall-mounted electric opener. More popular was the Udico brand, developed by Walter Hess Bodel in his garage and sculpted by his daughter Elizabeth, was manufactured by the Union Die Casting Company. The freestanding opener, which also incorporated a knife sharpener, was sold in flamingo pink, avocado green, and aqua blue, and soon was a mainstay in the similarly hued kitchens of the 1950s and early 60s, a far cry from opening cans with a hammer and a chisel. We'll end this with more fun facts about can openers and cans. In World War II, the U.S. Army issued the keychain-sized P-38 can opener known as the John Wayne because a training film showed the actor using it opening a can of K-rations. Canned veal that accompanied Sir William Edward Parry to the Arctic in the 1820s was then put in a museum, and it was finally opened in 1938. Analyzed and found still edible, the contents were fed to a cat. Cats are always on the scene. The red and white colors of the Campbell's soup cans, introduced nationally in 1899, were inspired by Cornell University's football jerseys.
False start, 5-yard penalty.
Early cans were made of wrought iron and lined with tin. Our can openers of today would not have opened them, hence the use of hammers and chisels for so very long. In 1795, Napoleon Bonapart offered a significant prize for anyone who invented a preservation method that would allow his army's food to remain unspoiled during its long journey. A scientist named Nicholas Appert won the prize in the early 1800s, but his process used glass jars with lids rather than tin cans. But this did spur the invention of the metal can just a year later. The first metal cans were made at a slower pace, 6 cans per hour. Around 50 to 75% of tin cans are recycled, causing the can to be the most recycled packaging product in the world, which is good because tin is a relatively scarce element within the abundance of the Earth's crust of about 2 parts per million. The United States is the world's largest primary user of tin. Virtually all primary tin needed to meet U.S. requirements is imported from Southeast Asia and South America. Tin has not been mined or smelted in the U.S. since around 1990. Well, this is another episode in the can, and if you like puns, stay tuned for another episode of Strange History next Tuesday. This podcast was produced by Dead to Me Productions, and of course, I, your host, Amy Domestico, hammered out this episode, but not with a chisel. A big thanks to Spreaker for being such a great podcasting platform. Love you guys. See you next week. Yay!